All right, guys, so we've covered mindset. Now we're going to be diving into pricing and positioning, because I know a big question for a lot of people, which is how much do I charge, and a number of other things. And I'm going to give you clarity around that today. So let's have a look at the mind map. So the first topic and thread here, which is when to go paid versus free. Okay. So I did cover this slightly in the previous training, but I just want to go over this again. I believe that it's very good for you to be doing some sessions with friends, right, at the free level to build up to a confidence point of saying, I'm ready to be paid. Okay. So, people often think to themselves, well, I'm not ready yet, but it really also depends on where that person is in comparison to your ability and skill level, and also what you feel that you can help to get them as a result. And we'll dive more into that in the sales training around conversations around people's needs. But one of my coaching clients, she made the transition to paid relatively quickly, but she'd already done those initial kind of sessions with people, right? Playing with your friends, coaching your friends, starting to, build a structure that you have for that, beginner session, if that's what you're doing. So I would definitely say that that internal thermostat, that internal compass, if you like, is important. And as I mentioned in the previous training, reactions to what you are doing, signals that, that was really great. Oh my God, I feel so much better. I feel like I've improved. I'm feeling confident now. People smiling. That smiling is not a single signal, but it's a determining factor on whether someone's having a good time, right? Well, maybe not, depending on how serious that person is when they're actually playing. I'll just throw that in there. Anyway, you get the idea. I truly do believe that a lot of people will put off being paid for a prolonged period, right? If you want to get clarity around that, ask in the community, all right, on that point. But really, it's those signals and then making the decision, okay, I feel like I'm ready, and then also linking back to the self-worth, right? Again, it's a multi-layered thing. So if you've done those sessions, if you've done that, then awesome, you're ready to be paid. How much is too much of doing free? The challenge with doing that is that you're going to find it difficult to then transit those people who you've really trained to have your stuff for free and then move them into paid. However, I will also say that you are also, and you may be already hearing this, which is people saying to you, I want to pay you for this. So I would say that a massive signal on you being ready to be paid is other people saying, I want to pay you, but maybe you've said no. And also that can be a bit about receiving and being willing to receive. So if you've had a person say to you, I like to be paid, and maybe, a couple of people, I think you're pretty much ready, and we can say now we need to move on to the next stage, which is really a milestone process in how much do I charge? How do I go about this kind of pricing structure? Now, I will say that, moving forward in your pickleball business journey, there is different layers, right? One-to-one, one-to-many, single session sales, package sales, bundling things together, clinics, corporate trainings. There's levels that we go through. For this specific challenge, I want you to focus on one-to-one and a paid session. And the reason why you want to do that is because we're just stripping away the reasons for self-sabotage. Because if, for example, you dive in and you're going to do a bunch of group stuff for your very first thing, then it could create some situations where you actually, don't move forward because it becomes too stressful. So you may transit into, group and other stuff moving forward. But I would say if you've not got your first paid client yet, and you're not feeling hyper confident, then stick with the basics and you can move into that tier later. You also want to do some you also want to do some framing rather with your first initial clients, letting them know that your pricing is going to change. Okay, so let's talk about this big topic. There is a mindset that we can have, which is, what's the going rate, right? Comparison to what other people are doing. They're doing this versus other people are doing that. I've said it on my podcast since the start, which is, it's more about your overall package, because watching this, I don't know whether you also have other skills like nutrition, and you're also a fitness trainer, and you're also a life coach, and you've got all these other things. So long term down the road, you may have a whole different kind of offering and package offering. So, but for this initial session, the most important thing is for you to be paid. It doesn't necessarily matter the amount, and this is where I think a lot of people get stuck. So what I do in this situation, and I am going to give you a number. If you're here like, Simon, just give me a number, because I know for some people they just need structure. I'll give you that. But I do an exercise with people which I think is useful for getting into kind of mindset of energy around too low and too high, and then kind of finding a sweet spot. So let's just say I was coaching you right now on a Zoom call, and I asked you a question. I said, hey, how about $1 for a training session? Well, you're going to go, that's ridiculous. Well, I have to pay this for the court, and that's not even worth my time. And so then it actually is good to say that, like $1, because it helps you feel what is ridiculous. Like, oh my God, that would be so valuable, right? So then if I said, okay, how about $1,000? You're going to go, Simon, come on, right? So you get these two poles. So what we want to do is we want to start to move up, like mentally. So if I said to you, I'm talking for a beginner session as an example, right? For an hour's coaching. If I said to you, $20, how does that feel? Like, what are you feeling? You're, Simon, like, come on, that's good, okay? What about $30? And then I want you to just move up, okay? $40. How do you feel? Just sit with it for a sec. You've really got to do this exercise. It's a bit more difficult when I'm doing it on a camera. I normally do this on a call, and I'm, getting a sense. I'm actually looking at body language of, like, how people react. And what I'll do is I'll just go up the tiers, right? So $50, $75. There's going to become a point, ignoring what other people are charging, there's going to become a point where you start to go, oh, like, I don't think I can charge that. So what you want to do is, if you're not going to use my pricing structure for your first session, which is really based upon what I've done with my other clients, you want to find a point whereby you still are feeling an intrinsic sense of that's valuable, it's worth my time, but it's not too far up where you're going like, I'm not really sure someone's going to pay that, and here's why. Because when you move into the sales training, what most likely will happen is you will either self-sabotage the whole process, or you'll get into conversations and you'll kind of stumble. You want your first sale, in my opinion, to be a number that feels confident, because in a sales conversation, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here into the sales training, but I'll cover more then. You want to feel confident all the way through from the conversation to the point of which you say how much it is. Because people, the biggest struggle with selling something is, for a lot of people, is not the conversation about where are you with your pickleball? Where do you want to be? All of that stuff. It's the point of the transition of actually talking about the price, because all of the shit comes up, frankly, around, they're not going to like it. They're going to challenge me. They're going to say X, and it's just all a load of mental spaghetti. Random word, right? So move up, and then find that little sweet spot. For you, it might be, I don't know, again, I don't know your skill level. I don't know where you're at. Determining factors. You might be at $40. You might be at like 75. You might be at 100. This is your first session. And remember, you can change this when your next clients come in. Okay? So if you want the number for the structure, right? The number's going to be $50. Charge $50 for your one-to-one session, and that can be an hour. It can be 90 minutes. It's up to you. It's obviously dependent on the court cost. But again, this is a baseline building your confidence starting point, right? So if the court, for example, is $25 for an hour, or it might be $10 where you are, who knows? It might be free. Lucky you, right? There's obviously going to be more profit in there, but just this is a kickstarting process. So go with $50, and essentially that is the starting point, right? $50 for the session, and then we'll cover more in the sales training of the process going from that into you being paid and actually having a conversation with someone. So answering the big questions, when to go paid versus free, we've answered that. How much to charge, do the exercise starting at something that's really ridiculous, moving up to something that's really high, then move up the scale, and then find that point. And then if you want structure, use $50. Okay, now I want to move on to more positioning. So this may come as a shock to some of you. This is actually the same in other industries that I've worked in as this one. You do not need a website. You really actually don't need to brand yourself yet to get started. A website, all of these things can be a big form of self-sabotage actually for a lot of people before they get started. Because the model and the system that we're going to actually use is not to have someone buy a thing off of your website. So you can understand why that would be a hurdle, right? I need a website. I need to put a button on my website. It's going to say this. Well, actually, when you're first starting, all of that is actually going to slow down the process of you getting a paid client, because maybe they go there and they bounce off the site because it loads too slow or it doesn't resonate with them or whatever. But when you use a different model, which is essentially going to be having a conversation with somebody on social media or in person, for that matter, one of the two, we're going to keep it simple, not give you too many options. What you're going to find is it actually becomes a much easier process. And then you can move into that stage of website and branding and putting buttons on your website when you've actually made a investment back. All right. The clients I work with, they're not at the point of having a website and doing branding. Starting to talk about it after a month to 6 weeks. Got some investment in, got them up into the next tier, right? Beyond this one. It's milestones, it's stages. So can you do that? Absolutely. How much time and focus does that take? It takes a lot of time and focus. Could you end up then getting into the point where you're like, I'm wondering why I'm not having anyone book with me? Well, because I've just shared my site everywhere. And also what that does in a way is, you know, what it trains you to do by doing that straight away is starting to like post links in groups just to get people to your website. And it avoids actually the personal side, which we'll cover actually in the next module and next stage. So I would say, if you're here and you want to follow the system and you want to follow the process, shelve the website for a period of time and do that when you're at the point where you've already built some clientele up, you've already started to do that. And then when you've got enough people, then you can start to build an email list, you can start to build a brand, you can start to do all of the other things and the bells and whistles. But the actual fact is, to make money, to make sales, you do not need a website for your business, and you do not need to go into any kind of, extended branding, stuff like that. Okay, now we need to also talk about offer, because in the next training, we're going to be talking about the sales process. What are you offering? Okay, so people are wanting lessons, right? So Do you need to give a fancy name to it right now? No. All that you need to know, really, to get clarity in this part of the training is how much is someone paying me and what they pay me for. All right. And there's multiple ways over time that we can create different tiers and things that you offer that bring you more revenue, that give you more reach, that help you to expand. Actually, you might not even want that, but you might, right? But for this process of getting your first client, keep it simple. I would say, depending on the court investment, right? I would say 60 minutes is fine for a beginner lesson. I'm using that as an example, okay? So that's what your offer is going to be. And what is the outcome of that offer? It's that you're going to know X, Y, and Z, because expectations are very important. When I started this training, I gave you the expectations on what you can expect. And I also told you who it's for and who it's not for. So to make somebody happy, right, when they've made an investment, is there needs to be expectations, right? So what are the wins that they're going to have? By the end of your beginner lesson, you're going to know X, Y, Z. But it's actually also based upon the conversation. And if you don't have those conversations, what people struggle with then is how to actually position an offer, because in reality, a lot of the time, you will actually create an offer based upon a conversation versus it being very, forced in your head of exactly how it's going to go. Because you could have a conversation with someone, think one thing, it actually go a completely different way, and you end up offering something else. We'll talk about that more further down the line. So, exercise for this training. Decide how much are you going to be charging for your first lesson? How long is it going to be, and where are you going to be doing it? Those are the big questions that you need to really have before you move on to the next stage, because otherwise you may go into some form of self-sabotage. I will see you in the next training, where we are going to be covering the lead generation process, the marketing piece. And just remember, this is like putting a jigsaw together. You've got to have multiple aspects. You've got to have the right mindset. You've got to understand, obviously, the pricing, where you're doing things. And then you have to move into the next stage of, okay, getting a lead and then turning that lead into a sale. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in the next training. And I'll see you then.